Extreme thinking thrives in a humorless environment, but once you've laughed at something, you never quite take it as seriously again. When I was younger, or so I'm told, I had a good sense of humour. I was always able to laugh at myself, despite the turbulence of a regular childhood, and despite, being bullied at different schools. No matter how many times I changed school, I seemed to be bullied wherever I went, and living in abusive households. Despite that, I managed to maintain that sense of humour. But when I got into my late teens and I got really into spirituality, and then eventually into what I've now come to call a pseudo-therapy cult with spiritual themes, then my sense of humour sort of disappeared a little bit. Where I used to have a sense of humour, it was sort of replaced by this weird sort of forced goofiness, which, I've always been a little bit goofy, but there was sort of a weight to this goofiness. It was like it had this ideological charge, and laughing at myself or being able to take what I believed or what I was saying, lightly enough, not seriously enough to be able to see the funny side of it and actually have a joke about it, that was virtually impossible. And as regular spiritual interest became like super gung-ho, like cult spiritual interest, that went from bad to worse. And of course it did, How can you have a sense of humor when this thing that you're talking about, whether it is a spiritual thing or a religious thing, or political thing or some sort of economic philosophy, whatever it is, if this is the thing that's going to save the world, if this is the thing that you believe is like the most important thing ever, why would you have a sense of humor about it? Especially when taking it super, super seriously is like what fixing the world depends on, right? The sad irony though is the more you can laugh at yourself and your point of view, the more enduring I think your perspective can be once you've sort of settled on whatever it is. If you can see the funny side of whatever position you're holding, if you can see like the other side, and I think that's a big part of being able to see the funny side, being able to entertain other perspectives as well, not just having like this one perspective that you absolutely swear on and it's the only one you can even think of. If you can see other perspectives and if you can see the funny side of what you believe, I think that can help to stop you from taking it too far, and it can help you to have a little bit of humility about whatever it is, which, if nothing else, makes you marginally less intolerable to talk to whenever you're talking to someone about whatever it is that you're into. And it means that you maybe, and this is a maybe, you'll maybe do less cringy things that you'll look back on years later and sweat while thinking about. And I say that from my own experience, take it from me. Extreme thinking thrives in a humorless environment, but that doesn't mean that these kinds of groups, these kind of ideological cliques don't have their own kind of sense of humor, if you can call it a sense of humor. Is a lot of the jokes are sort of unfunny, sort of sheltered, weird, like cliquey jokes that are based on the ideology and are just largely unfunny to anybody outside of the group, if you would even get it. And inside the group, these kinds of things tend to be treated as funny on the basis of sort of agreeableness, conformity, compliance of the adherents of this sort of ideology or belief system, rather than on the merits of the funniness of the thing, That said, I think there's a reason that like the political left just don't make good memes. I think it's because they take themselves so fucking seriously. There's no room for actual humor because it's all, no, we need to save the world, we need to do good. And like, I can understand that, I'm as left-leaning as the next person, but they just miss the mark on the humor. And I think that's because they take themselves so seriously. And that's the same with a lot of the sort of spiritually kind of memes as well. It's more sort of snide, sanctimonious garbage a lot of times than it is anything that's actually funny, Unfortunately, this has also kind of moved over to actual comedy as well. Like, comedians aren't making sort of edgy jokes as much anymore. They're kind of holding back. Even the edgier comedians aren't doing that anymore, really. They're sort of holding their tongue. They're not challenging these sort of new norms and the direction that society's going in. They're sort of, in a way, have ingratiated themselves in certain political, the culture war stuff, really, usually on the left. They've sort of ingratiated themselves in that, I would imagine, on pain of, harassment and ostracism because of stuff, because of cancel culture and similar cancel culture-y sort of milieu around a lot of the political conversations, if you like, even if it's not full on Twitter cancel culture identitarianism, you know? And honestly, I think that should be a concern for anybody who doesn't want to live in a society run by zealots. I think having a sense of humor and using comedy, using laughter to take the piss sometimes out of, even if they're very good positions politically or whatever, being able to see the funny side of them, being able to appreciate the other perspective, if not for a bit of a laugh, you know, because it does bring about a sense of humility. It does sort of bring people down a peg or two, and I think we need that sometimes, because humor is so much the Achilles heel of zealotry. You know, you see it all the time when you look into like fascist leaders and cult leaders and mass movements that are built on ideological purity or utopianism in one way or another. They cannot handle people taking the piss out of them. It's I mean, let's be fair, it's uncomfortable anyway to have someone laugh at you. That's never nice. But I think it's something that, you know, you have to have a sort of thickish skin with, you know, because that's kind of life. There's always going to be people that don't fully agree. There's always going to be people that want to laugh either at you, with you, but you can't laugh with anybody if you don't have a thick enough skin to be able to tolerate a little bit of good-natured ribbing, you know? And I think laughter, and you know, as I'm saying this now, I'm realizing I'm about to say I've got from somewhere, and I'm not sure where I've got it from. So if you know where I've heard this before, or where I might have heard this before, then let me know in the comments below, because I have no idea. But I know I've heard this somewhere before. Once you've laughed at something, you never quite take it as seriously again. And of course, like cult leaders and, you know, people who are bent on control in one way or another are going to want to stamp that out, because laughter at the ideology at the expense of the leader in one way or another, something that challenges their grandiosity in a way, is a sign that the ideology is not all-consuming, that it hasn't yet consumed the totality of that person's awareness, their consciousness, their identity, let's say. It means that it hasn't yet swallowed you whole, because you've got enough emotional distance from the idea or whatever to see the funny side of it. There's a power in laughter, I think, and when you lose that to zealotry, to severity, to taking things so seriously, you're missing out on a strength that I think it can provide. And, you know, of course there's a time and a place, but there really is a strength that comes from being able to take life a little bit more lightly, you know. As someone who is recovering from something that effectively, you know, stripped me of the ability to see the funny side of things in one way or another, and, you know, someone who's been recovering from this for what, like 8-9 years or something now, I think there comes a point during recovery from something like that where you have to find it in yourself to take a long, hard look at yourself, at your ideas, your beliefs, your convictions, and learn to see them in such a way that you can have a sense of humor about them. And in so doing, I think you regain some personal power. You regain a little bit more access to a more grounded and honest perspective. In the years since my spiritual stuff sort of like stripped away my ability to actually have a decent sense of humor, I've noticed it starting to come back over the last sort of 4 or 5 years in a big way. You know, at first, as you've sort of seen on the channel, if you've been watching this channel for a little while, it came back as this sort of very snide, sort of cynical, sarcastic sort of sense of humor, which is something, it's good, and there's a time and a place for that. But it's also now starting to come back as fun. Not the kind of fun that's like, oh, what do you do for fun? Well, I scroll on Facebook until I feel like a sort of warm Easter egg that's sort of caving in on itself as a chocolate. You know, when chocolate gets warm, it starts to sort of fold gently, just sort of like that in on itself. Like that's how I feel when I'm on Facebook too much. Not that kind of fun, like actual fun, you know, silliness, lightheartedness, a little bit of goofiness, but not forced and ideologically laden, just fun for the sake of fun, joy for the sake of joy, laughter for the sake of laughter, for the sake of enjoying my life, you know? And having done so, I've found like a little bit more humility when it comes to my ideas, to not think that because I've got an idea that I think is right, that I'm not the only one who can figure out what the right idea is, or something along those lines, you know, a little bit more humility in that way. And it's my hope that in your recovery, if you're going through something like that, if you've been through something like what I've been through, that you're able to find your way to a few more laughs and maybe a little bit more humility when it comes to big ideas in your own recovery, in your own life. Usually when I put a video like this up, there's stuff I can't include in the video, be it due to time constraints or be it due to YouTube not really liking you talking about certain things on the platform. So whenever I do put a video like this up, I tend to also upload an audio companion over on my Patreon. So if you want to hear those, most weeks I put those up, then go ahead and check out the Patreon link in the description and on the end card in just a second. I'm Andy Fellows, and this channel is all about thinking for yourself in the face of cults, destructive spirituality, and toxic online culture. Please be kind and ask good questions, and I'll see you in the next one.